The silver tongs in my husband's hand gleamed under the Hamptons' sun, yet they were not as cold as his smile when he tossed divorce papers onto my paper plate instead of a rib. Derek thought humiliating me before 200 guests would break me, forgetting that I wrote the crisis management manual for his company. He did not realize my legal team was not just eating burgers. They were waiting for the command to open fire. My name is Valerie Thorne, and I was currently standing in the epicenter of what polite society called the event of the season. The White Summer Party was an annual tradition for Apex Dynamics, held at our sprawling oceanfront estate in the Hamptons. The air smelled of sea salt, expensive cologne, and the hickory smoke drifting from the massive outdoor kitchen. I smoothed the front of my cream linen dress, forcing a smile as I accepted a glass of champagne I had no intention of drinking. I circulated among the investors and tech moguls, playing the role of the supportive wife to perfection. Yet, a cold knot had been tightening in my stomach since 6 in the morning. The staff had been avoiding my gaze. The security detail was double its usual size. Something was wrong. Across the manicured lawn, my husband, Derek, held court by the industrial-sized grill. He looked every inch the golden boy of the tech world in his rolled-up sleeves and designer sunglasses. He laughed at a joke made by a venture capitalist from Silicon Valley, throwing his head back with that practiced, magnetic charm that had once fooled me, too. He was basking in the adoration of the 200 guests who hung on his every word. They saw a visionary leader. I saw a man who had not looked me in the eye for 3 months. Then I saw her, Monica, the new marketing director who had been hired less than 6 months ago. She was wearing a white dress that was far too short and far too tight for a corporate gathering. She leaned into Derek, her hand lingering on his bicep a fraction of a second too long, whispering something that made him smirk. When she caught me watching, she did not pull away. Instead, she raised her chin in a challenge. The audacity was suffocating. Valerie Derek's voice boomed across the patio, cutting through the ambient jazz. "Darling, come here. I have something special for you right off the grill." The crowd parted. I walked toward him, the gravel crunching softly under my sandals. He picked up a paper plate. But instead of the prime rib he had been slicing, he reached under the prep table and produced a thick manila envelope. With a theatrical flourish, he dropped it onto the plate. It landed with a heavy thud. Served," he said, a cruel grin stretching across his face as he offered me the plate. "You are served, Val." The chatter died instantly. 200 pairs of eyes locked onto the plate. I could feel the heat rising from the pavement, but my blood ran cold. "Irreconcilable differences," Derek announced, his voice projecting clearly to the silent audience. "I think it is best if you leave the premises immediately. We wouldn't want you to ruin the mood for the real stakeholders of Apex Dynamics." The silence was deafening. I looked at the papers, then up at his eyes. I did not cry. I did not scream. I saw the cameras on the phones of the guests raised high, recording every second. This was not just a breakup. This was a calculated execution. He was trying to paint me as the hysterical, discarded wife to discredit me before the board meeting next week. He wanted a scene. I would not give him one. Monica stepped forward, sliding her arm through Derek's. She looked at me with pity that felt like acid. "Please, Valerie," she whispered, loud enough for the front row to hear. "Just go. Try to keep a shred of dignity for yourself." I reached out and picked up the heavy file. A smear of barbecue sauce had transferred from the tongs to the cover. I pulled a silk handkerchief from my pocket and methodically wiped the stain away. The action was slow and deliberate. I looked Derek dead in the eye. "You always were messy with the details." "Derek," I said, my voice steady and low, "enjoy the party. It will be the last thing you ever own." I saw a flicker of genuine fear disrupt his arrogant mask, but it was gone in a heartbeat. I turned on my heel and walked away. I did not run. I walked with the rhythm of a soldier marching to war. He thought he had ended me. He had no idea he had just authorized his own destruction. The red light on the electronic lock blinked mockingly at me. I punched in the code for the third time. It was the date of our wedding, a number that had opened this door for 7 years. Access denied. My phone vibrated in my clutch. A text message from the bank informed me that my primary credit card had been suspended due to suspicious activity. Then another notification popped up. My joint checking account was frozen. Derek had moved with the efficiency of a guillotine. He had not just locked me out of our bedroom, he was attempting to starve me out of existence. I stood in the hallway, the distant hum of the party still drifting up from the patio. Most women would have collapsed. Most women would have pounded on the door or called their mother in hysterics. But I was not most women. Before I was Mrs. Derek Thorne, the philanthropist and perfect hostess. I was Valerie the Fixer. For 10 years, I cleaned up the messes of Fortune 500 CEOs. I buried scandals, spun narratives, and made problems disappear. I had retired to build Derek's empire, to be his partner, but the skill set never left me. I had been a fool in love. Yes. I had signed prenuptial agreements that were heavily weighted in his favor because I trusted him. I had signed waivers last year to facilitate a loan, believing his lies about cash flow. But the professional paranoia that had kept me alive in the corporate world had never fully slept. I always kept a backup. I walked down the hall to the large abstract painting of a stormy ocean. I slid my hand behind the heavy frame and felt the cold steel of the wall safe. I keyed in the combination. Inside sat a black burner phone and a heavy encrypted flash drive. I powered on the phone. It was fully charged. I dialed one number. Valerie Julian's voice was rough, like gravel in a blender. I saw the live stream. That absolute... Save the outrage. Julian, I said, cutting him off. Is the team ready? We have been ready since you called me in March, but Valerie, seeing it happen... Are you okay? I am focused, I replied, my voice devoid of the tremor I felt in my hands. I need you to execute the first protocol. I am going dark. I told you he was up to something when we saw those withdrawals. Julian said, I know. $50,000 for client entertainment in a single night. Derek is greedy, but he is cheap. He never spends that kind of money unless he is trying to impress someone new or hide something big. I knew 3 months ago. I hung up and slipped the phone into my dress pocket. I did not pack a bag. I could not risk being stopped by security with luggage. I slipped out through the service entrance near the kitchen. Mrs. Gable, the head housekeeper, saw me. Her eyes filled with tears, and she reached out a hand as if to stop me, to offer comfort. I shook my head slightly. I could not handle pity right now. Pity would make me weak. I walked 2 miles to the main road and flagged down a taxi. Where to, the driver asked, eyeing my expensive dress. The Starlight Motel, the one off the interstate, I said. 30 minutes later, I was sitting on a lumpy mattress in a room that smelled of stale cigarettes and industrial cleaner. I tore open the manila envelope Derek had thrown at me. I scanned the legal jargon, my eyes darting over the clauses. It was a butchery. He was claiming I had made no financial contribution to Apex Dynamics. He was offering a settlement of $20,000. $20,000, I whispered, the paper crinkling under my grip. He thinks 10 years of my life is worth $20,000. The insult burned away the last remnants of my heartbreak. This was not just a divorce. This was a deletion. Derek was clearing the books. He wanted to merge with Omega Corp, and he needed full control of the stock. He needed me gone, discredited, and destitute so I could not claim my share of the billion-dollar payout he was expecting. I opened my laptop and bypassed the motel Wi-Fi, tethering to the burner phone's encrypted connection. I typed in a server address that did not exist on any public search engine. A black login screen appeared. It was the back end of the Black Cloud, the offshore server system I had set up for Apex 5 years ago. Derek thought I had lost the admin keys years ago when I stepped down to become a housewife. You forgot who built the castle. Derek, I said to the empty room. I typed in the password. The screen flashed green. Access granted. I was in. The glow of the laptop screen was the only light in the dingy motel room. My fingers flew across the keyboard, executing search queries that would have taken a standard auditor weeks to formulate. I was not looking for profit. I was looking for the bleed. And there it was, buried under layers of corporate obfuscation. I found 3 separate entities registered under the guise of environmental charities, Green Horizon, the Blue Initiative, and Eco Future. On the surface, they looked like legitimate tax write-offs for Apex Dynamics. But when I drilled down into the transaction logs I had synced to my private cloud, the pattern emerged. Every month, massive sums were transferred to these accounts for consulting fees and logistical support. Consulting fees, I muttered to myself, highlighting the rows of data. Since when does a charity charge $2 million a month for consulting? I traced the registration of the shell companies. They all led back to a single post office box in the Cayman Islands, a tax haven with privacy laws so thick they were practically impenetrable. But I knew how to find the cracks. I ran a cross-reference on the signatory name Thomas Kincaid. It took me 10 minutes to link him to Monica. He was her second cousin, a failed real estate agent from Florida who suddenly seemed to be managing an international portfolio. The picture was complete, and it was uglier than I imagined. Derek was not just divorcing me. He was gutting the company. He was siphoning off the liquid assets into accounts controlled by Monica's family, inflating the company's value on paper to sell it to Omega Corp, and leaving the shareholders with a hollow shell. Once the merger went through, he would disappear with the cash, and the debt would implode on the new owners. But digital footprints were one thing. They could be explained away as hacking or clerical errors in court. I needed hard evidence. I needed the papers with his wet signature. I closed my eyes, visualizing the layout of our penthouse in Manhattan. Derek was paranoid, a trait that usually served him well. He never trusted the cloud completely. He always kept a physical doomsday file just in case he needed leverage against his partners. He kept it in the one place he thought nobody would dare touch the wine cellar. Specifically, behind the rack of 1982 Petrus. I picked up the burner phone and dialed a number I had memorized years ago. It belonged to Russo, the head of security for our building in the city. 2 years ago, his son had been arrested for a foolish mistake involving a stolen car. I had pulled strings, called in favors, and got the charges dropped. Russo had sworn he owed me his life. "Hello." His voice was gruff, suspicious of the unknown number. "Russo, it is Valerie," I said. There was a pause on the line. "Mrs. Thorne, I heard. I saw the news. I am so sorry." "Do not be. I need to cash in that favor. Russo, tonight." "Anything," he said immediately. "Mr. Thorne is still out in the Hamptons. The staff is with him. The penthouse is empty. I need 15 minutes inside. Can you get me up the service elevator without logging my entry? For you, the cameras will be down for routine maintenance. Just tell me when." I hung up and immediately called Julian. "I found the money trail," I said as soon as he answered. "He is embezzling millions through Monica's cousin. But I need the physical ledger to prove intent. I am going into the penthouse." "Valerie, stop," Julian shouted, his voice cracking with stress. "You cannot go in there. Technically, you have been served. You have been vacated. If you enter that apartment, it is trespassing. If he catches you—" "My God, Valerie, if he catches you, he will press charges for burglary. You will lose everything." "I have already lost everything." "Julian," I snapped, my hand gripping the phone tight. "He is stealing my life's work. I am not going to let him win on a technicality. It is too dangerous. If the police come, the police will not come." Derek is drunk on champagne and victory in the Hamptons. He will not be back in the city until Monday morning for the board prep. That gives me 36 hours. Valerie. Julian sighed. A sound of resignation. If you get caught, I cannot stop them from arresting you. Then I better not get caught, I said, and closed the laptop. I stood up and walked to the mirror. The woman looking back at me was tired, her makeup smudged, her dress wrinkled, but her eyes were sharp. The grieving wife was gone. The fixer was back on the clock. New York City at 2 a.m. was never truly silent, but the service entrance of the Millennium Tower felt like a tomb. I pulled the brim of my baseball cap lower, shielding my face from the street cameras. In my pocket, I clutched the magnetic key card Russo had left for me in a fake electrical box outside. I was dressed in oversized gray coveralls, looking like just another invisible night shift worker. I swiped the card. The light turned green. The service elevator ride to the 50th floor took 45 seconds. I counted every heartbeat. When the door slid open, I stepped into the foyer of what used to be my sanctuary. The penthouse was dark, but the air was different. My signature jasmine scent was gone, replaced by something cloying and floral. It was Monica. She had already marked her territory. The violation made my skin crawl, but I pushed the emotion down. I had a job to do. I moved to the security panel by the main door. It was a state-of-the-art biometric system I had installed myself. Derek thought it was foolproof. He forgot that I wrote the source code. I flipped open the maintenance port and plugged in a small decoder device. "Sleep tight," I whispered. 10 seconds later, the system looped. The cameras would now play a pre-recorded feed of an empty hallway for the next hour. I was a ghost. I moved quickly to the wine cellar. The climate-controlled room was chilled to exactly 55 degrees. I walked past rows of vintage Cabernets until I found the prize a bottle of 1945 Romanée Conti. It was worth more than most cars, but its value tonight was functional. I gripped the neck of the bottle and twisted it to the left. A section of the mahogany shelving clicked and swung outward, revealing the heavy steel door of the wall safe. My fingers trembled slightly as I dialed the combination. Left to 30, right to 14, left to 7. The lock tumbled. I pulled the heavy door open. Inside, stacked neatly beside piles of cash, was a black leather-bound notebook and a silver hard drive. The Black Book. This was Derek's insurance policy, a detailed log of every bribe paid to city officials to expedite zoning permits for Apex Towers. I pulled out my phone and began photographing every page. Snap, turn, snap, turn. The flash was the only light in the room. Once done, I grabbed the hard drive and shoved it into my deep pocket. Ding! The sound of the main elevator arriving echoed through the silent apartment like a gunshot. My blood froze. "I am telling you, I need water," a woman's voice slurred. "Monica, you have had enough. Babe." Derek's voice followed, sounding annoyed. "Come on." They were early. They were not supposed to be back until Monday. Panic flared, hot and sharp, but instinct took over. I could not make it to the service exit. I looked around frantically. The only hiding spot was the narrow maintenance closet behind the cooling unit. I squeezed into the cramped space, pulling the door shut just as the cellar lights flickered on. Through the slats of the vent, I could see them. Derek was supporting Monica, who was swaying unsteadily in her white dress. "Ugh, this place spins," Monica groaned, leaning against the very wine rack I had just closed. "So, when is she officially gone? I hate feeling like a guest." Derek laughed, the sound vibrating through the wall against my back. He poured himself a drink. "Don't worry. She is done," Derek said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "I cut her cards. I locked her accounts. She is probably sleeping on a park bench right now. She is too proud to beg and too stupid to fight dirty." I bit my lips so hard I tasted copper. Stupid I was standing 3 feet away from him, holding the evidence that would send him to federal prison. What about the merger? Monica asked, her voice muffled as she buried her face in his shoulder. It happens Wednesday. Derek replied. I announce the sale, the stock skyrockets, and we walk away with $200 million. By the time Valerie finds a lawyer cheap enough to take her case, we will be in the Maldives. I love the sound of that. Monica giggled. Let's go to bed, Derek said. I need to rest up for the kill. I stopped breathing as they lingered. Finally, the lights clicked off and then their footsteps retreated up the spiral staircase. I waited 10 full minutes in the dark, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. When I finally slipped out of the closet and back into the service elevator, my legs were shaking, but my mind was clear. Wednesday. He was selling the company on Wednesday. That was 48 hours away. I touched the hard drive in my pocket. He wanted a kill, I would give him a war. The sun was barely cresting over the skyline when I placed the hard drive on Julian's desk. The mahogany surface was cold, but the data inside that small metal rectangle was radioactive. Julian, usually the picture of composure in his three-piece suits, looked pale as he scrolled through the images I had taken of the black book. He took a sip of his black coffee, his hand shaking just enough to cause a ripple in the dark liquid. Valerie, do you understand what this is? Julian asked, his voice low. This is not just leverage for a divorce settlement. This is a nuclear bomb. Bribery, racketeering, corruption. If we detonate this without precision, the fallout will kill you too. You were his wife while this was happening. The feds might see you as an accomplice. I leaned back in the leather chair, crossing my arms. I had anticipated this. I was the trophy wife. Remember the one who did not contribute financially? I said, quoting Derek's own insults back at him. But you are right. We need a firewall. We need someone who can testify that I had no knowledge of the operations. We need someone who signed the checks. Julian's eyes widened. Marcus. Marcus Reynolds was the former CFO of Apex Dynamics. Derek had fired him last month in a public and humiliating rage, blaming him for the cash flow issues that Derek himself had caused. Marcus was the perfect weapon, knowledgeable, credible, and furious. I found Marcus at his townhouse in Brooklyn 2 hours later. He looked like a man unraveling. He was unshaven, wearing a stained bathrobe at 9 in the morning, and the smell of scotch wafted through the screen door. Get the hell off my porch, Marcus slurred, squinting at me. I have nothing to say to a thorn. I am not a thorn anymore. Marcus, I said, holding up my hand to show the empty ring finger. I am the woman who is going to burn Derek to the ground, and I heard you brought the matches. He hesitated, then unlocked the door. Inside, his living room was a mess of takeout boxes and unpaid bills. We sat at his kitchen table. The negotiation was brutal. Marcus was terrified of prison. He will destroy me, Valerie, Marcus said, his voice trembling. Derek has judges in his pocket. If I talk, if I testify. I go to jail for signing those transfers, not if you turn state's witness, I countered firmly. Julian can cut a deal. Full immunity in exchange for the big fish. But I need to know everything. Marcus. What else is he hiding? Marcus looked down at his hands, wringing them together until his knuckles turned white. It is not just the bribes, he whispered. It is the loans. To cover the losses from the shell companies, he needed liquid cash fast. He took out 3 massive loans against your personal assets, the beach house, your trust fund, even your portfolio. I felt the blood drain from my face. I never signed any loan documents. Marcus looked up, his eyes full of grim apology. I know. He traced your signature. He forged it. Valerie, on federal bank documents. I watched him do it. The silence in the kitchen was heavy. This was the final nail. Adultery and embezzlement were bad, but bank fraud and forgery were federal crimes with mandatory prison sentences. Derek had not just stolen from me, he had stolen my identity to finance his theft. I left Marcus with a promise of protection and returned to the temporary office Julian had set up. I opened my laptop to check the news, and a wave of nausea hit me. The headlines were screaming. Troubled tycoon wife Valerie Thorne's secret battle with addiction. Sources say Apex CEO's divorce, sparked by wife's mental instability. Derek was moving fast. He was planting stories to paint me as an unreliable narrator, a crazy ex-wife whose accusations could not be trusted. The articles claimed I was hysterical, spending thousands on wellness retreats that were thinly veiled rehab stints. Julian cursed softly when he saw the screen. He is trying to get ahead of the story. If you speak out now, you look defensive. I am not going to speak. I said, closing the browser tab. I am going to let him sweat. I opened a secure email client. I composed a new message to Derek's private work address. I did not write a subject line. I did not type a single word of text. I simply attached one high-resolution photograph, the cover of the black book, resting on the floor of his secret safe. I pressed send, somewhere in Manhattan, in the middle of his victory lap. Derek's phone was about to ping, and for the first time in his life, he was going to know what it felt like to be the prey. My burner phone vibrated on the table, dancing across the wood with the intensity of the incoming calls. The screen flashed Derek for the 20th time in 1 hour. I watched it buzz until it went dark. I had blocked his number, his office line, and even the main switchboard of Apex Dynamics on my primary phone. The silence was my first weapon. I imagined him in his glass-walled office, loosening his tie, sweat beading on his forehead as he stared at the email I had sent. He would be turning on Monica by now, his paranoia eating him alive. Did you tell anyone about the safe? I could almost hear him screaming at her. In the quiet conference room of the law firm, Julian and I were drafting a document that would act as the final nail in his coffin. It was an emergency motion for asset freezing. "Do we file this today?" Julian asked, his pen hovering over the signature line. "No," I said, shaking my head. "If we file now, his lawyers will get an alert. They will countersue and stall the board meeting. We need him to feel safe enough to walk into that room on Wednesday. We file it the minute I walk through the door." I needed to apply pressure from a different angle. I picked up the phone and dialed the direct line for the acquisitions department of Omega Corp. I activated a voice modulation app that deepened my pitch. "Acquisitions. This is Roberts." A crisp voice answered. "Mr. Roberts. I am an independent risk consultant," I said, keeping my tone professional but ominous. "I cannot give you my name, but I suggest you look very closely at the environmental charity write-offs in the Apex ledger before you sign anything on Wednesday. You are about to buy a corpse." I hung up before he could ask a single question. The seed was planted. By 2 in the afternoon, the ripples reached us. My contact in the Apex accounting department texted me that Omega Corp had just demanded a raw data audit of the last 3 quarters. Derek was now fighting a war on 2 fronts. He had a blackmailer in the shadows and a buyer getting cold feet in the light. Back at the penthouse, the inevitable happened. Monica must have gone to check the safe. She would have found the cash untouched, but the hard drive missing. I knew exactly what she would say. "Call the police." "Derek," she would shriek, realizing her own name was all over those files. "Have her arrested." She broke in, but I was already 1 step ahead. I was not sitting in a hotel room waiting for the police to knock. I was walking through the metal detectors of the federal building in Lower Manhattan. I sat in a cold, gray interrogation room across from Special Agent Miller of the FBI. I was not a suspect. I was a whistleblower. "Mrs. Thorne," Miller said, leaning back in his chair, "you understand that by handing this over, you are implicating your husband in federal bank fraud. I am implicating the CEO of Apex Dynamics." I corrected him, sliding a folder across the steel table. "This contains the proof of the forged loan documents. I am trading this for immunity and physical protection. I want to be the one to open the door when you come for him." Miller opened the file. His eyebrows shot up as he saw the signatures. If this validates, we can have a warrant by tomorrow morning, he said. I left the FBI headquarters feeling lighter than I had in years. Derek had received a preliminary summons for the divorce asset dispute by now. I knew him. He would look at a civil summons and laugh. He would think his expensive legal team could crush a simple divorce case. He had no idea that the Department of Justice was currently printing his arrest warrant. I returned to my small hotel room as the sun began to set. The board meeting was tomorrow morning. I opened the garment bag hanging on the back of the door. I ran my hand over the fabric. I had not chosen a black suit for mourning, nor a white one for innocence. It was a dress, sharp, tailored, and red, a deep, violent crimson. It was the color of blood. It was the color of war. Tomorrow, I whispered to the empty room. Tomorrow. I take it all back. Ladies and gentlemen, the future of Apex Dynamics is not about looking back at dead weight. It is about streamlined innovation. I watched Derek on the 60-inch screen in Julian's conference room. He was standing at a podium in the lobby of the Apex building, microphones thrust in his face like spears. He looked impeccable, but his eyes were too bright, too manic. Monica stood beside him, clutching his arm as if she were the first lady, though she looked more like a deer in headlights. My former wife. Valerie. Derek continued, saying my name like it was a dirty word. She was a companion for a different phase of my life, a gold digger of the past, if you will, but Monica here represents the future. I took a sip of water, a cold smile playing on my lips. Every word he spoke was being recorded. Every insult was another count of defamation. He was practically writing the settlement check for me on live television. He is hanging himself, Julian said, walking into the room. He placed a document on the table with a satisfying slap. The judge just signed it. Emergency asset freeze order. It covers everything. His personal accounts, the joint accounts, even the offshore entities we identified. Do not serve it yet, I said, my eyes never leaving the screen. Let him feel invincible for a few more hours. Just then, my phone chimed. It was an encrypted message from Sarah, a junior executive assistant at Apex who I had mentored years ago. Attached was an audio file. Subject, you need to hear this. Recorded near the grill at the BBQ. I pressed play. The background noise of the party filled the room, clinking glasses. Laughter. Then, Derek's voice cut through, low and conspiratorial. Don't worry about the zoning for the new plant. I slipped the councilman $50,000 in cash inside a burger box. It is done. I froze. The BBQ, the white summer party, wasn't just a stage for my humiliation. It was a cover for active bribery. He was arrogant enough to commit a felony in the middle of a party with 200 witnesses. He thinks he is untouchable, I whispered, on the screen. The ticker at the bottom showed Apex stock dipping slightly. Rumors were starting to leak. I switched tabs on my laptop to the monitoring system. A red flag popped up. Monica was moving. She is panicking, I said, pointing at the screen. Look, she is trying to wire $2 million from the EcoFuture Shell Company to a bank in Switzerland. She sees the stock wobbling, Julian noted. She is trying to cash out before the ship sinks. Not on my watch. I forwarded the transaction alert to the bank's fraud department, attaching the digital copy of the court order Julian had just obtained. Within 30 seconds, the status bar on the transfer turned from pending to denied legal hold. Somewhere in the city, Monica was staring at a transaction failed screen, her blood turning to ice. 10 minutes later, the repercussions hit the top of the food chain. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Derek. He must have just tried to buy something, or perhaps his private banker called him with the bad news that his accounts were frozen solid. Derek, you think this is funny? You want to play hardball? Fine. A second text followed immediately. Derek, $5 million, cash, wired to your account today. You sign a non-disclosure agreement and walk away. This is the best offer you will ever get. Don't be stupid. Val. I stared at the number. $5 million. To him, it was a fortune to silence a nuisance. To me, it was an insult. He still thought this was about money. He still thought I was the woman who would settle for scraps to avoid a fight. He had forgotten that I did not want his money. I wanted his legacy. "$5 million," I said to Julian, showing him the screen. "That is an admission of guilt if I ever saw one." Julian laughed. "He is trying to bribe a witness." "Let him wait," I said, setting the phone face down. "He is going to need every penny for his bail bond." I looked down at the glowing screen of my phone, the digital letters of Derek's bribe staring back at me. $5 million. It was a lot of money to most people, but to Derek, it was just a line item, a cost of doing business to make a problem disappear. He really believed I was a problem that could be bought. My thumbs moved coolly across the glass as I typed my reply. I did not hesitate. $5 million is not enough to buy back my dignity. See you in the boardroom. I pressed send and set the phone down on the hotel nightstand. I could almost hear the sound of his rage from across the city. Within 10 minutes, my hunch was confirmed. Russo, my contact in security, sent a short encrypted text to my burner phone. He just put a fist through his iPhone. He screamed at the front desk. "You are officially on the blackball list. Security has been ordered to arrest you on site if you step foot in the lobby." I smiled into the darkness of the room. Derek was predictable. He played checkers while I was playing three-dimensional chess. He assumed my only entry point to the shareholder meeting was as his wife. He had forgotten that Apex Dynamics was a public company. 2 days ago, while he was grilling ribs in the Hamptons, I had quietly purchased a block of shares from Mr. Henderson, a retired engineer who had been with the company since the garage days. It cost me a premium, but I now owned 0.01% of Apex stock. That tiny fraction gave me the legal right to walk through those doors and ask questions. Sleep was impossible. I spent the night pacing the small carpeted floor of the hotel room, rehearsing my opening statement. I visualized the layout of the boardroom. I calculated the sightlines. I anticipated his interruptions. At 2 a.m, my burner phone rang. The number was blocked, but I answered. "Valerie." The voice was breathy, panicked, and slurred. It was Monica. "You are up late." "Monica," I said, my voice flat. He is out of his mind," she whispered, the fear palpable even over the connection. "He is drinking straight scotch. He keeps talking about destroying you." "Valerie, listen, I can help you. I can testify that he forced me to open those accounts." I hit the record button on the app I had kept open for exactly this moment. "You want to cut a deal," I said. "But you signed the papers." "Monica, I only signed for the shell companies," she cried out, her voice cracking. "I knew about the tax haven in the Caymans. Yes, I knew we were moving money. But I didn't know about the forged loans. I swear he told me it was just creative accounting. I don't want to go to prison for fraud." "You knew about the shell companies," I repeated, locking her confession into the digital file. "You knowingly facilitated money laundering. I had no choice. He is the CEO. We all have choices. Monica. And you just made your last one." I hung up and saved the file. It was the final piece of the puzzle. Derek was the mastermind, but Monica had just admitted to being a willing accomplice in the embezzlement scheme. They were tied together now, sinking in the same boat. I forwarded the audio file to Julian. A moment later, he texted back, "Got it. This is fatal. I have the team ready. 5 of the sharpest litigators in New York are meeting us at the coffee shop across from Apex at 7 sharp. Get some rest. Val." But I could not rest. I imagined Derek in our penthouse, staggering around with a glass of expensive amber liquid, telling himself that he was the king of the world. He probably believed that his security guards and his high-priced lawyers could shield him from reality. He thought power was a wall. He was about to learn that power is a ladder, and I was sawing off the rungs. The sky outside the window began to turn a bruised purple. Then a bleeding orange. Dawn. Wednesday morning. The day of the merger. The day of the sale. I showered and dried my hair, styling it sharp and sleek. I applied my lipstick, a shade of red so dark it was almost dangerous. I looked at the woman in the mirror. The heartbreak was gone. The fear was gone. There was only cold, hard calculation left. The sun broke over the horizon, illuminating the city where my husband lay in a drunken stupor, unaware that the storm was already at his door. It was time to go to work. The sidewalk outside the headquarters of Apex Dynamics looked less like a business district and more like a shark tank during a feeding frenzy. I had sent a blind tip to the Associated Press at 4 a.m, promising the scoop of the decade. By 8, every major news van in the tri-state area was idling at the curb, their satellite dishes pointed like accusations at the glass tower. I walked past them, flanked by Julian and his team of sharks, slipping through the side entrance before the mob could spot the woman in the blood-red dress. 40 floors up, the air in the boardroom was thick enough to choke on. Through the glass walls, I could see Derek standing at the head of the massive mahogany table. He looked like a man holding onto a cliff edge by his fingernails. His skin was pasty, a stark contrast to his dark suit, and beads of sweat had already broken through his makeup. Seated around him were the grim faces of the major shareholders and the skeptical executives from Omega Corp. They were not smiling. They were waiting for answers about the rumors of fraud that had mysteriously appeared on financial blogs overnight. The rumors are baseless slander, Derek stammered, his voice projecting a confidence he clearly did not feel. We are financially robust. The merger is the natural next step for our evolution. He clicked a remote, and a slide showing a fabricated growth chart appeared on the massive screen behind him. He turned to point at a rising green line. That was my cue. I pushed the heavy double doors open. They swung inward with a heavy, expensive thud. The sound cut through Derek's presentation like a guillotine. Every head in the room turned. I stepped inside, the click of my heels on the marble floor the only sound in the room. I was not the weeping, discarded wife he had left at the barbecue. I was the executioner. Security. Derek shrieked, his voice cracking into a desperate falsetto. Get her out! She is trespassing! She is having a mental breakdown. 2 uniformed guards moved toward me, their hands reaching for my arms. Julian stepped in front of me, a wall of expensive wool and legal menace. He slapped a document onto the table in front of the Omega Corp CEO. My client is a registered shareholder of this company, Julian announced, his voice booming. She has a legal right to be present at any emergency meeting regarding the sale of assets. If you touch her, I will file assault charges before you can blink. The guards froze. They looked at Derek, then at the legal order, and stepped back. Derek gripped the podium, his knuckles turning white. His eyes were wide, darting around the room as if searching for an exit that did not exist. Valerie, you are sick, he hissed, trying to lower his voice but failing. Get out. Do not make a scene. I did not say a word. I walked straight past him. I could smell the stale alcohol seeping from his pores beneath the heavy cologne. I reached the podium and unplugged his laptop from the main console. The screen went black. What are you doing? The representative from Omega Corp asked. Standing up. Showing you what you are actually buying, I said calmly. I plugged my own laptop into the HDMI cable. I hit the spacebar. The screen behind me flared to life. It was not a graph of profits. It was a complex flowchart titled The Shell Network. This is where the money went, I said. I clicked again. The screen changed to a high-resolution photograph of a handwritten page. It was the entry from the Black Book regarding the $50,000 bribe to the zoning commissioner. The date matched the day of the barbecue. And this is how he got the permits, I added. Derek made a strangled noise in his throat, lunging for the cable. But the Omega CEO slammed his hand on the table. Sit down, Thorne, the CEO, barked. Let her finish. I clicked one last time. A screenshot of a text message conversation appeared. It was Monica's number, plainly visible. Derek. I moved the cash to the Swiss account. If the audit happens, we are dead. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. I looked at Derek. The blood had drained completely from his face, leaving him looking like a wax figure melting under the heat. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. The arrogance was gone. The lies were gone. There was only the naked, terrifying truth staring back at him from a 60-inch screen. I stood at the head of the boardroom table, my palms flat against the cold mahogany. The silence in the room was heavier than lead. Derek was staring at the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. You wanted to serve me divorce papers at a barbecue because you thought I was defenseless, I said, my voice ringing clear and sharp against the glass walls. You thought I would be too embarrassed to fight back. You forgot that I was the one who built your defenses, Derek. And today, I brought my own team to your office. I nodded toward the side entrance. The double doors burst open. It was not just Julian and his associates who walked in. Behind them were 4 men in windbreakers emblazoned with 3 letters that make every corporate criminal's blood run cold F. B. I. Flanking them were inspectors from the Securities and Exchange Commission. No, Derek whispered, gripping the edge of the table until his knuckles turned white. No, this is a mistake, Monica. Realizing the ship was going down, made a break for the door. She tried to slip past the security guard, clutching her designer bag to her chest. Sit down, Ms. Davis, a federal agent barked, blocking her path. I didn't do anything, Monica screamed, her composure shattering. I was just an employee. He made me do it. I tapped a key on my laptop. Her voice from the phone call I had recorded the night before boomed over the conference room speakers. I knew about the tax haven in the Caymans. Yes, I knew we were moving money. Monica froze, her face draining of color as her own confession echoed around her. She slumped into the nearest chair, burying her face in her hands. She is lying, Derek shouted, pointing a shaking finger at her. She went rogue. And Marcus. Marcus did the transfers. It was his department. I was hoping you would say that, I said calmly. Julian stepped aside, revealing a man standing quietly in the back of the group. It was Marcus. He looked tired, but he was clean-shaven and standing tall. I followed your direct orders. Derek, Marcus said, his voice steady. And I kept the emails to prove it. The representative from Omega Corp stood up, buttoning his jacket with a look of absolute disgust. The merger is off, he declared, tossing the prospectus onto the table. Effective immediately. And you will be hearing from our legal department regarding the fraudulent data you presented to us. We do not do business with criminals. On the wall behind Derek, the live stock ticker for Apex Dynamics turned a violent shade of red. The line on the graph plummeted like a stone dropped from a cliff. In a matter of minutes, the company's value was cut in half. Then it fell another 10%. Derek turned around and watched his net worth evaporate in real time. The empire he had sacrificed our marriage for was burning to ash. Derek Thorne, the lead FBI agent, said, stepping forward and pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. You are under arrest for federal bank fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. Derek offered no resistance as they pulled his arms behind his back. The click of the steel cuffs was the loudest sound in the world. As they turned him around, he looked at me. His eyes were wide, wet, and filled with a pathetic desperation. Val, please. He choked out, his voice cracking. Help me. I am your husband. Please, do not let them take me. I looked at him, feeling absolutely nothing. The love I once had for him had been grilled and served on a paper plate 3 days ago. Actually, about that, I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out the divorce papers he had thrown at me. I smoothed them out on the table right in front of him. I picked up his gold Mont Blanc pen, the one I had given him for our 5th anniversary. With a steady hand, I signed my name on the line, Valerie Thorne. I believe these belong to you, I said, sliding the papers toward him. Irreconcilable differences. Indeed. I dropped the pen onto the table. It rolled and stopped against the handcuffs. I turned and walked out of the boardroom. The hallway was a frenzy of flashing lights and shouting reporters, but I did not stop. I slipped my dark sunglasses on, shielding my eyes from the glare. I did not answer their questions. I did not need to explain myself. I walked out of the revolving doors and into the fresh morning air of New York City. The sun was warm on my face. I had lost a husband, but I had regained my life, my dignity, and thanks to the Whistleblower Reward Program, a very secure financial future. I smiled, took a deep breath, and hailed a taxi. The war was over. I had won. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment below, sharing your city or country so we can connect. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people.